They said Africa couldn't rise. They said no nation without skyscrapers or silver streets could manufacture change. But in a dusty village forgotten by most, a shift began with a fruit no one even wanted. Not gold, not oil. A soft-skinned, easily spoiled, sweet-smelling fruit dropped to the ground every harvest season. People stepped over it. Children ignored it. Traders laughed at it. But on May 26, 2020, that fruit became the seed of something radical. Burkina Faso, a country often dismissed as too small, too poor, too silent, was about to make the world listen. That day, President Ibrahim Traoré stood in the heart of a quiet town called Peni and opened the doors of a 1 millionaire factory. Not for the nut that brought in dollars, but for the fruit that brought in flies. A discarded apple, a forgotten half. It wasn't just a factory, it was a signal. Burkina Faso grows nearly 2 million tons of cashew apples every year, but the global market only sees the nut, the kernel. The apple, bright red and yellow, rich in vitamin C and flavor, is dumped, rotted, burned, ignored. Every year, mountains of it disappear before they're even tasted. The logic was set. The nut had value, the apple had none. And for decades, this logic shaped the economy, the mindset, the system. But the logic was wrong. You see, the cashew apple isn't trash. It's treasure in disguise. In other parts of the world, Brazil, India, industries were built around it. Juice, wine, vinegar, alcohol, all made from what Burkina Faso threw away. Why hadn't they done the same? Because industrial transformation isn't just about machines, it's about mindset. And for a post-colonial economy taught to extract and export, belief in self is the hardest thing to come by. The apple spoils quickly, it bruises easily. Without fast processing, it becomes worthless within hours. So people stuck to what they knew. Harvest the nut, toss the fruit. But in Peni, something changed. A shift in thinking. A decision to stop playing small. To stop exporting potential and start keeping value. The factory in Peni was designed to process 5,000 tons of cashew apples each year. Not for snacks in Paris or sweets in Mumbai, but for juice in Ouagadougou, for vinegar on West African shelves, for wine made in the soil where the fruit grew. It wasn't just about making products, it was about creating value from something long ignored, and in doing so, rewriting who gets to participate in the global economy. Every bottle from Peni is more than a drink, it's a declaration. It says, we are no longer the raw materials suppliers for someone else's wealth. We are producers of our own. That shift brings dignity, it brings gimmys, it brings hope, and it brings a question: why now? Why this fruit? Why this place? Because timing matters. And in 2020, as global food trends pivoted toward natural ingredients, exotic flavors, and sustainable sourcing, the world began craving what Burkina Faso already had. Cashew juice began appearing on wellness blogs in Europe. Cashew wine caught the attention of connoisseurs in Asia. Quiet whispers of demand, waiting for someone bold enough to listen. And Traoré listened. With local farmers, entrepreneurs, and technologists, he placed a bet, not just on a factory, but on a future. On a system that rewards transformation, not just extraction. On value that stays rather than leaves. It's a future many said was impossible. And yet, here it is, humming with machinery, pouring bottles and waking up a nation. The ground in Peni has changed, not just the soil, but the silence. Where once you heard only the wind through the cashew trees, now there's a low hum, pipes, belts, fermenters, valves. Machines designed not to extract, but to create. It's easy to miss the meaning unless you've lived in a place where for generations, worth came only from what left the country. This is no ordinary factory. There are no foreign logos, no clipboard consultants flown in from Paris or Delhi. This project didn't begin in a corporate boardroom. It began in a farmer's hand, sticky with the juice of a fruit no one wanted to buy. And now, suddenly, the fruit is everywhere, being sorted, washed, crushed, fermented, bottled, sold. It's not just the fruit that's changing, it's the people. In towns surrounding Peni, there's a shift in the air. Farmers no longer rush to discard the apples. Traders ask new questions. Do you want the fruit too? They say. It's a small question, but it carries a big meaning. For the first time in their lives, the answer is yes. The cashew apple has become a commodity. The numbers back it up. This factory will inject over 867,000 annually into the rural economy, just through buying local apples. That's direct cash, no middlemen, no global market fluctuations, just guaranteed demand. For the farmer who used to lose half their crop to rot, this changes everything. And with that change, something else rises. Power. Burkina Faso has long been at the mercy of international buyers. One price shift in Vietnam, one trade decision in India, and the whole market wobbles. But now, with local processing, the equation flips. Burkina Faso doesn't have to sell everything raw. It can say, we'll keep this part, we'll process it ourselves, and we'll sell finished goods. That kind of statement doesn't just shake up markets, it unsettles them. This isn't about building walls, it's about building value. Think of it this way. Every year, Burkina Faso exports hundreds of thousands of tons of raw cashew nuts. Once they leave, they're processed, polished, packaged, and sold for up to 4 times the original value. That money never comes back. It builds factories in Asia. It funds advertising in Europe. But it doesn't build schools in Bobo Dioulasso. It doesn't pay for clinics in Gawa. It doesn't raise farmers' children from poverty. But when you process locally, that changes. Value stays, jobs stay, skills grow, even pride grows. Because this isn't just an economic story, it's psychological. For too long, people were told what mattered was what came from outside. A wine from France, prestige, a bottle from Ghana, trust. But one made in Burkina Faso? Suspicion. That's the deeper battle this factory is fighting, not just against poverty, but against doubt. And here's where you come in. If you're watching this and you've ever wondered whether your country could do more than survive, this is proof. If you've looked at your community and thought, we have resources, but no voice, this is your answer. If you've been told to wait, to stay in your lane, to accept that the value is elsewhere, remember Peni. It is no longer a village of silence. It is a village of action. And with every bottle, every box, every new product, it tells a bigger story. That transformation doesn't start with foreign aid. It starts with belief. So if this story sparked something in you, don't just think about it. Talk about it. Because ideas like apples rot if you leave them on the ground too long. Drive west from Bobo Dioulasso and the road changes. The smooth tarmac becomes red dust. The air smells like earth and fire. Villages drift past, quiet and sunbaked, homes built from clay and tin. On most days, there's not much noise. Just farmers tending fields, women drying fruit in baskets, children playing with old tires. But as you get closer to Peni, something else begins to rise. Not buildings, but ambition. Because in this dry, overlooked corner of Burkina Faso, a transformation is happening. One that global investors still don't fully understand. At the heart of it is a fruit once ignored and a factory unlike any other. This isn't charity. This isn't aid. This is strategy. Pure, calculated, rooted in the soil and built by hands that were once told to wait. The factory structure isn't flashy, but its meaning is powerful. Inside are specialized machines for crushing, fermenting, bottling. Outside, trucks begin to line up. Farmers arrive with crates not just full of nuts, but apples. Bright, fragrant, sticky with promise. For decades, Burkina Faso's place in the global cashew trade was simple. Grow, harvest, export raw. Other countries did the rest. Vietnam cracked, India packaged, Europe sold. And Burkina Faso? It waited, watched, got paid the least, but not anymore. In Peni, the logic has flipped. Now the country is keeping part of the harvest, processing it here, building value on home soil. No more selling low and buying high. No more being at the mercy of distant buyers. With one decision, Burkina Faso began rewriting its economic script, and it all started with a fruit too soft to ship. The cashew apple spoils in less than 48 hours. That's why no one ever touched it. But with this factory in place, that limitation becomes an opportunity. Instead of seeing the fruit as a problem, they've turned it into a source of power. Juice, vinegar, wine, alcohol, products with long shelf life, high margins, and global appeal. And something else is happening too. For the first time, Burkina Faso is building what economists call price resistance. That means control. When your only option is to sell raw, the buyer sets the price. But when you process locally, you create options. You can say, "We'll sell you nuts, but we're keeping some for our own wine line." You control the terms, you negotiate with strength, and there's more. This single factory isn't just a local story, it's a regional one. Imagine cashew juice from Peni being served on flights to Accra, cashew vinegar on supermarket shelves in Bamako, cashew wine at weddings in Abidjan. Is for the first time becoming its own best customer. The idea isn't new, but the execution is bold. Intra-African trade has long been a promise, rarely a reality. But with projects like this, that's changing. As countries like Ghana and Nigeria watch what's happening in Burkina Faso, the question will echo, if they can do it, why can't we? That's how real change begins, not in policy meetings, but in places like Peni, with factories powered by belief, with farmers who no longer sell cheap and dream small, with a community that sees itself not as laborers in someone else's supply chain, but as owners of its own. Let's be honest, this isn't just about cashew juice. It's about dignity. Because for years, African nations have done the growing while others did the gaining. This isn't conspiracy, it's structure. And structures don't change by themselves. Someone has to break the pattern. Someone has to build new systems where profit stays, jobs stay, and pride stays. Peni is doing just that. So if you're watching this and you still think the future belongs to those with wealth alone, think again. Sometimes the future begins with a fruit, a quiet place, and a people finally ready to see value where others saw waste. Machines don't change nations. People do. It sounds simple, but it's the core truth of every revolution. You can build a factory, import state-of-the-art equipment, and pour millions into production. But if the people don't believe in it, if they don't own it mentally and emotionally, it becomes just another building. And Africa has seen enough of those. Grand projects with no roots. Skeletons of ambition left to rust. So what makes Peni different? It demands belief, not just in juice or vinegar, but in identity. In the idea that Burkina Faso, so often reduced to exports and charity, can be a center of creation. It asks farmers to stop seeing themselves as suppliers and start seeing themselves as producers, as entrepreneurs, as partners in a national industry. But that shift takes work, because for decades the system trained them otherwise. Trained them to grow, to harvest, to wait for a buyer, to accept low prices, to never ask what happens after the crop leaves, to believe that the end of the road was the border. Changing that thinking isn't just education, it's re-education. And it starts young. Schools that once taught basic agriculture must now teach agro-processing. Food science should be as respected as engineering. Marketing shouldn't just be a foreign concept. It should be part of the national curriculum. Because a bottle of cashew wine is not just a drink. It's a story, a brand, a message. And if we don't own that message, someone else will. Even the consumer must change. Because here's another truth. Local products often struggle not because they're poor in quality, but because they're poor in perception. Imported goods carry an aura of trust. Local ones, even when better, are seen with doubt. That's not economics, that's psychology. And it's a wall that no factory can knock down unless the people are ready to climb over it. So how do you do it? You build not just a product, but a movement. You link farmers to processors, processors to distributors, distributors to retailers. You create a chain where each link feels invested, where everyone from picker to packager feels like a shareholder in the final result. That's how value is kept. That's how dignity is restored. But the risk remains. If this mindset doesn't take root, the entire model wobbles. Peni's factory, as bold as it is, could become another what if. Another lesson in lost opportunity. Because steel and glass don't create transformation, people do. And people need more than machines. They need vision, training, and trust. And that brings us to the real test ahead. Can this factory teach a nation to believe again? To believe that local doesn't mean lesser? That African-made isn't a last resort, but a first choice? That the fruit of their land is not just for feeding others, but for feeding their own future? Because make no mistake, the world is watching. Not in headlines, not on TV, but quietly. Buyers, exporters, middlemen, they've noticed. They see the shift. A country once known for raw supply now building finished goods. A quiet town turning into a blueprint. And that scares them more than any protest. Because if Burkina Faso succeeds, others will follow. Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Ivory Coast. The old logic of export cheap and import value will crack. The global trade system, so dependent on Africa's rawness, will feel the tremor. Not loud, but real. And it all started here, with a fruit once forgotten, a machine now humming, and a people who are learning, slowly but surely, that transformation begins the moment you stop waiting for someone else to do it for you. When a country begins to control what it once gave away, the world listens, quietly, carefully, sometimes nervously, because power doesn't always shift with armies, it often shifts with factories. With supply chains, with who gets to say, this is ours now. And in Burkina Faso, that shift is unfolding bottle by bottle. The factory in Peni may look small on a map, but its message is massive. For years, global trade systems operated on a simple formula. Africa grows, Asia processes, the West consumes. That was the cycle. The African farmer supplied raw goods. Everyone else made the real money. The continent became essential, but always replaceable. Until now. Because now Africa is starting to ask a question it was never supposed to ask. Why can't we do the processing? And when that question is asked, not in theory but in practice, when a place like Peni builds machines, bottles its own fruit, and puts it on shelves across the region, supply chains begin to twitch. Brokers begin to worry. The system begins to crack. It's not loud, it's not violent, but it's real. And for those who've profited from predictable exports, it's a threat. Because this is how control shifts in the 21st century, not through coups, through competition. Imagine this, cashew wine from Burkina Faso appearing in Nairobi hotels, cashew vinegar stocked in supermarkets in Dakar, juices made from what was once rot becoming health products in Lagos. The African market, long seen as a supplier, now becomes a buyer. Stand from itself. That's not just growth, that's redefinition. But let's pause and be honest. This kind of shift doesn't come without resistance. There are global players invested in keeping things the way they are. Middlemen who built fortunes on underpriced raw goods. Multinationals who rely on Africa's low margins to keep theirs high. To them, a processing plant in Peni isn't just a curiosity. It's a signal, a warning, that their hold is loosening. And history tells us, when systems start to shift, someone always tries to tighten the grip. That's why what's happening in Peni must be protected, not just physically, but politically, with policies that reward local innovation, with regulations that favor homegrown value, with leadership that doesn't buckle under pressure. Because make no mistake, the real battle won't be on the factory floor. It will be in boardrooms, trade negotiations, shipping ports. It will be in quiet decisions about taxes, tariffs, and who gets access to which markets. And yet, despite all this complexity, the beauty of Peni is its simplicity. It started with a fruit so soft, so perishable, that no one wanted it. A fruit that spoiled faster than it could travel. But now, that same fruit is traveling. Not by the kilo, but by idea. It has become a symbol of something far larger. A declaration that Africa's time isn't coming. It's here. And the question now is simple. Will others follow? Ghana with its cocoa, Nigeria with its palm oil, Ivory Coast with its rubber. Each of them has raw power, Each of them has watched their resources grow someone else's economy. What if they too began to build where they used to ship? What if they too refused to be just the beginning of someone else's story? That's what makes Peni dangerous. Not because it's radical, but because it's logical. It makes too much sense. And when logic catches on, so does momentum. So as the cashew juice rolls off the lines, as the first bottles hit the market, as the scent of fermentation drifts through the red air of Burkina Faso, remember this. It's not just a drink. It's a shift, a signal, a quiet act of power, and it's only just begun. Change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and in Burkina Faso, the whisper has become a current, moving quietly through policy circles, through farming cooperatives, through dusty village roads. A current that carries a single idea. We no longer have to wait for the world to value us. We can value ourselves. In the town of Peni, machines now run where silence once ruled. Pipes clang, tanks hiss, and bottles clink into crates. The cashew apple, once kicked aside like trash, is now carefully handled like treasure. And behind every bottle is a new kind of pride, one that doesn't need foreign validation to feel real. But with pride comes responsibility. Because for this to last, for this to truly reshape Burkina Faso's place in the world, more than machinery is needed. It needs momentum. It needs unity across regions, sectors, generations. It needs farmers who see beyond the field, teachers who speak about transformation like science, leaders who put national interest before convenience. Most of all, it needs ordinary people to see something extraordinary in themselves. This is the hard part, not the building, the believing. You see, for generations, Africa was taught to supply, to grow the bean, dig the ore, raise the animal, and hand it off. That mindset runs deep. It shows up when we doubt local products, when we think French wine is more refined, when we glance past made in Burkina Faso on a shelf as if it can't be enough. That's not just taste. That's history speaking. But Peni wants to interrupt that history, not with force, but with a question. What if this is enough? What if we are enough? When a Burkinabe consumer walks past a shelf and sees cashew juice from Peni, they face a choice, not just between products, but between identities. Will they pick the bottle from Paris or the one from their own soil? Will they support the system that ignored them or the one trying to empower them? That choice matters every time, because every purchase is a vote for who gets to win in the future economy, a vote for which factories survive, which dreams grow, which stories are told. And for once, that power lies not in Washington or Beijing, but in Ouagadougou, in Bobo, in the smallest kiosk in the most forgotten village. But choice needs clarity, and clarity needs storytelling. That's why narratives matter as much as machines. The story of Peni isn't just about fruit, it's about value, economic, cultural, spiritual. It's about Africa finally seeing that the most powerful transformation starts with the most ignored places. And it's working. Already, inquiries are coming in. Regional distributors are asking for samples. Wellness blogs are spotlighting cashew juice from unexpected corners of West Africa. Tourism boards are starting to take interest. There's even talk of creating a national brand, Burkina Juice, bold and proudly local. That's what happens when one place dares to try. It gives permission to others. And that ripple spreads into mango processors in the east, into cottonseed oil producers in the north, and into millet breweries in the Sahel. Each of them watching, wondering, if Peni can do this, maybe we can too. This is not just industrial strategy. This is cultural restoration. It is Burkina Faso not just claiming economic agency, but reclaiming its voice. For too long, the continent has exported both its goods and its stories. Now it's time to do the opposite, to produce, to narrate, to own the full journey from soil to shelf. So here's the real question, the one that lingers behind every bottle of juice, every drop of wine. Do we believe in ourselves enough to finish what we started? Because no machine, no policy, no president can make that choice alone. It has to come from the ground, from the people, from the ones who were told they were small, finally standing tall. Transformation is no longer a promise, it's a process. And now that process has momentum. The factory in Peni no longer stands alone. It has become a model, a prototype, a symbol. From agriculture ministries to local cooperatives, everyone is asking the same question. What comes next? And the answer is clear: scale. Burkina Faso isn't stopping with one fruit or one plant. Behind the cashew apple lies an entire forest of opportunity. Mangoes, sorghum, cotton byproducts, even tamarind, each with untapped potential, each with a story similar to the cashew apple. Abundant, undervalued, and thrown away. But not anymore. The Council for Agro-Pastoral and Fisheries Sectors, CBF, has already outlined a vision. If Peni proves viable, dozens of similar facilities could be built in other growing zones. Not foreign-funded, not donor-led, but nationally planned, locally driven. Each one tailored to a region's unique produce, each one feeding into a new kind of economy, one rooted in processing, not just planting. That's the difference between surviving and building wealth. When a farmer sells raw nuts, they get paid once, but when a factory buys the fruit, processes it, and sells 10 different products, the value multiplies. Jobs multiply, skills grow, and suddenly rural areas aren't emptying out, they're powering up. This is what true decentralization looks like. For years, development was seen as something that happened in capitals, in tall buildings, in board meetings. But Peni changes the map. It says that power doesn't have to be urban. It can rise from the soil. It can hum inside a warehouse surrounded by red dust and silence. That redefinition matters, because it doesn't just affect Burkina Faso, it affects neighbors, it affects trade blocs. Imagine regional airlines serving cashew wine bottled in West Africa. Imagine supermarkets in Ghana or Mali stocking Burkina Faso's wellness drinks. Intra-African trade isn't just a dream, it becomes a daily habit. And with each new partnership, each new route, something else changes. Africa's bargaining power. No longer just a supplier of raw goods, countries like Burkina Faso can sit at negotiation tables with leverage. We can sell raw nuts, they'll say, but we can also sell juice. So make your offer count. That shifts dynamics. It breaks dependencies. And it rewrites how the world engages with African economies. But this is still a delicate moment. Success isn't guaranteed. The global market can be harsh. Logistics can fail. Local supply chains are still maturing, and international brands, once threatened, may try to undercut, imitate, or buy out the model. That's why resilience must be built into the foundation, not just in factories, but in schools, in communities, in the way people talk about their products, in the pride they take when saying, yes, this bottle came from here. That emotional investment is what separates a transaction from a movement, and it's already beginning. You can hear it in the stories parents now tell their children. You can see it in the eyes of young entrepreneurs who once dreamed of leaving and now dream of building. You can feel it in the rhythm of trucks moving through village roads, no longer just carrying away crops, but delivering finished goods to market. The air has changed, not with noise, but with purpose, not with slogans, but with steps forward. Quiet, determined, unstoppable. So what happens when a country turns what was once waste into wealth? It becomes impossible to ignore. It becomes a lesson to others. And most of all, it becomes a mirror, showing every other African nation what is possible when belief replaces doubt and when action replaces waiting. In the end, it's never just about juice. It's about what the juice represents. It's about who gets to decide the value of a thing, of a fruit, a field, a people. For too long, Africa's role in the global economy was scripted by others. Grow it, ship it, hope for a good price. But the cashew apple changed that. Not because the apple itself was special, but because someone dared to look at what everyone else ignored and see gold. That is the true revolution. Not in arms, but in vision. The moment Burkina Faso chose not to discard the apple, but to press it, bottle it, and put it on a shelf, something shifted. The world didn't notice at first. That's how most real revolutions begin. Quiet, local, dismissed. But now they're watching. Because Peni is no longer a quiet town. It is a challenge. It asks uncomfortable questions. Why should wealth only be created elsewhere? Why should Africa wait for permission to produce value? Why should a farmer see only the price of a kernel when there's a market in the juice? And the most powerful question of all, what if the value never left? For decades, Africa has shipped its worth away. Minerals, crops, talent. The continent fed the world and stayed hungry, built economies and remained underdeveloped. And no one asked why, because the pattern had become familiar, almost accepted. But the cashew apple breaks that pattern. It says, maybe what we've been discarding was never waste. Maybe the world's disinterest doesn't define our worth. Maybe what we thought was too soft to survive was exactly what we needed to grow. And suddenly a bottle of juice becomes more than refreshment. It becomes resistance, a symbol, a strategy, a way to say we are no longer just the beginning of someone else's value chain. We are the beginning, middle, and end of our own. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. Machines don't build nations. People do. And people don't transform economies with equipment. They do it with mindset, with belief, with the audacity to look at a fruit the world called worthless and say, let's start here. So the final challenge doesn't lie in foreign trade. It lies at home. In the classrooms that must now teach agro-industry, not just agronomy. In the parents who must tell their children, you don't have to leave to succeed. In the consumers who must look at a local bottle and choose it, not because it's cheaper, but because it's theirs. That choice, made again and again, is how revolutions endure. Peni will not fix everything. No single project can. But it plants a seed, and if that seed takes root in minds, in markets, in generations, then the transformation will outlast the machines. Because the greatest thing a factory can produce is belief. And so we return to the simplest question of all. Can a fruit change a country? Not if it's just eaten. Not if it's just sold, but if it becomes a reason to build, to believe, to rise, then yes, it can.